Let us shrug on jumpers, NHS specs, and tighten up our bicycle clips. Coast down the hill to Hull perhaps, or maybe Winchester Cathedral. Being with you is like rationed butter spread out against toasted tea cakes. Pims and boy scholars, pounds not dollars, and the sky hardy grey. Kiss me under a bridge, punch me, Judy, but make sure the Bobby's not carrying a pistol, and the Ripper tour ends in time for last call. I want us both to shag against a lorry, smear pseudonyms on a factory wall. So that's a kind of a reaction to England and its music. This one's called The Quest of the Holy Grail. And I shiver with anticipation at the coming into me of a swan, Lancelot or Bors at dawn. Love lets us pivot, turn. A spear above or below will burn in the same internal intense urn. A body is just an interpretation of any delight in all penetration. It was kind of a homoerotic moment I was having when I wrote that. I've been trying to work through that for quite some time. This next poem is called Flying Bullet for You. Leap lightly now, leap darkly. The train throws its classic conversation with England here across the rain. And skies like lead make judges plead for some sun. See, it's begun, the journey by day, lit by little horizon. Mostly what's gone before. Hand over your ticket, friend, and bend to sway as over the rolling land your carriage says what it feels to go through a country plain as night, clear as clay, not ever talking, never stopping, but disrupted mind, bit by bit, oh, for being so happily at play. I'm just going to read one section from the poem, Sister, I'm a Poet, and it's called Death by Vomit. Death by vomit won't happen to Gromit, though as for Wallace, when he went to the palace, he bit into a wombat and lost quite some face, and now, post-combat, drowns in dribble and dross. Thought that would be a little British. It's not a poem unless it's seen. It's not a machine unless homegrown. It's not a phone unless it types by horse. It's not a hearse unless you get outborn. It's not a greenhorn unless it blows. It's not a rose if it smells like glass. It's not a pass if you fail to kiss. It's not a miss if you knock it out. It's not a parka if it's sprayed on. It's not a tan if you wash it off. It's not a cough if you want it to be. It's not a bee if it floats like a bag. It's not a nag if there's no dream. It's not a scream if you smile. It's not a mile of 7 leagues. It's not cigs if you're running rings. It's not a song if you speak. It's not weak if it is song. It's not wrong if you write it down. It's not a clown if it won't mime. It's not rhyme if you can't recall. It's not small if it fits in your head. It's not dead if it stands up to pee. It's not me if you dream it instead. It's not lead if gold in them hills. It's not pills if you don't feel better. It's not a sweater if a garter snake. It's not cake if no ice cream. It's not a beam if no deep moat. It's not a quote without fingers. It's not singers if they faked. It's not a lake if no lady. It's not shady if you start to blister. It's not sister if no kid. It's not it if you forget the ego. It's not meager if lots of plenty. It's not mentis without compost. It's not piss without the taking. It's not making unless there's breaking. It's not talking unless you listen. It's not glisten unless light. It's not sight unless Milton. A few more. This one's called Togam, which is maggot backwards, and I wrote it after reading Paul Muldoon's latest book. And here's the note at the bottom. Note on the poem. Not wanting to commit the heresy of paraphrase, I hesitated to add this prose coda last night, but feverishly I slept uneasily and woke to want to lend some clarity to the verbal bombast of my knee-jerk poem. The poem's argument is elliptical and vague, but follows this line. A significant poet will have a strong signature style that will A, tempt other poets to copy, and B, will prove difficult or impossible to forge. Milton learns from Tasso and gets away with it, but few others can. Muldoon's style is indelible and unique for its music and wit, and is almost bullying in its swagger. My soul is beaten up by the power of Muldoon's style, and I end up locked in the boot of a gangster's car, silenced for trying to ape it. The paradox is my poem is still generated from the quandary, raising the question of how poets can and should address style in their peers. Okay. It's called Togam. Seeing as pastiche is just spray painting a pebble to put on a beach so that homage to Paul Klee ends up clobbering Cassius Clay before he altered his moniker to Mohammed, which is a bit like moving the mountain to Moy or a molehill, or saying a fountain can't give youth because it is Floridian when it can, because Obama made miracles happen, or like being Irish in Japan, or a GI in Kyoto, Mr. Moto in a Honda Civic, privy to a music that makes critics swoon, as if life on Mars was no microbial squirt, but gravel from the sod that Patrick flung when sick, and tired of local squabbles. In short, if copying a king cat lays up big baubles in the court of St. James or is at St. Paul, then plagiarism is what comes before the pride that tips off that satanic fall that bedeviled Milton, who also had his blind side and his traditions, and the way he copied Tasso to go for Baroque, which is a sort of jewel-encrusted squawk one might expect from a parrot let loose at Kitty Hawk, flopping over the sand mid-Atlantic for a nanosecond before being dumbstruck and ending up as a blue, bloating drumstick, or a Kit Kat finger in some Kingpin's band ring, or a herky-jerky soda jerk milkshaking vanilla for a thrill that would make the woman who lopped St. John from his head for a sick kill look like a puppy playing with a bit of bark. So sounding like a poet you're not is like igniting a spark that was already burning, looping ancient learning, unrolling dead scrolls from their guarded dome, returning home, got up like St. Jerome, clutching a Jeroboam. Every grain that grates the oyster or grit that grits the mill is a 1,000,000 to 1 bet that your style is golden, will run a mile in under 4. Score when most voices are more fluster than flirt, more pay than dirt, more mustard than kernel than nugget, more sound than Puget, more off than kilter, more halt than halter, more middy than Walter, less witty than that altar on which sprawls tradition, which is most individual when going gaga for Madonna or seeing a beetle in the pile. For those deaths on the Nile were all smiles for the biro, and every kooky writer is a valet to their hero, and no digit can green a seedbed if it is all bad, and you can't be indifferent when someone's roll and rock has kicked sand in your soul, like some haymaker bitch-slapped your face, or KO'd you in a boot with a sock in it. Say nothing, mister, nothing at all. Okay, it's just a few more. To change the mood a little bit, I wrote some elegies for poets over the last few years. And this one is for Peter Porter. It's I knew Peter Porter in a rather elliptical way, I suppose. I met him only, or a casual way, like many of us do in the world of poetry. I knew him through his when we would meet at literary events, and we often found ourselves clutching glasses of rather bad white wine. Some of you might be having that experience tonight, and we would talk for a few minutes, and I found him to be quite a charming person to talk to, although he once said to me with a straight face, I was talking about music, and I said that Ireland's best rock band was U2, and he looked at me and said, "Who is U2?" And I talked to him for a few minutes about them. He said, "Never heard of them," and I was very impressed by that kind of, he really did maintain his love of classical music. This is called In Memoriam, Peter Porter. You dead, and I listening to Kate Nash already, which I know, Peter, smashes any sense of decorum this might have achieved. Then again, bookish nights we met by accident holding free wine, you tend to speak well of music. Fine talk, deeply traditional. I'd reply by citing more popular things. Died, Porter, impossible. He lived across canvases or scores, in a note's loss and colors fading also. He wrote of the world as if to use form is to love, as if to hold a word true to its place was to rise in a chapel, kiss high grace. Just 3 more poems. This is a taster. It's a 90-page book of poems, and I'm reading the ones that are more tasteful that I can read without my throwing something at me. So once again, thank you for being here this evening, and do get yourself a copy or 3. So make a good Christmas gift. I will sign them for anyone in your family or even strangers you might want to give them on the street. This one's called Presentation. For my opening remarks, some closing comments. To sum up, let's begin. To conclude, 3 points, off the record, so to speak. Let's have a minute break of silence to jaw. Mulling it over, we'll move on. No progress without pause. May I draw your attention to what I won't say next? Note the handouts I didn't bring. Listen to those songbirds that last week we'd like to sing. 2 more poems. This is called In England. The last time I launched a book, it was published by British Press, Tall Lighthouse, 2 years ago. They went out of business soon afterwards, but I think they're back now. Thank goodness. Les Robinson was a wonderful editor, and I think he passed it on to something else, to someone else, I should say. And in that 2 years, I've had a nervous breakdown, had quite a serious illness, been off work for 6 months, and now I'm back. I'm much better. And this poem was kind of written in that period, or just before that period of great difficulty and challenge in my life. And some of the people in this room are close friends of mine who have seen me through these last few years, and I want to thank you for being here then, being there then, and for being here tonight. The air is active, intervening, and divisible. A girl passes. Sorrow narrows and reduces, whatever were the higher trespasses. I've done some thinking lately. Sun slowly passes a hand across vales and lakes here, and momentarily a look of grace descends. A thought drafts up, feeling like a soul might if souls were allowed. Cars are parked for large men to mark them. I want so much to bunch the lamps together in the park. A bouquet. And finally, I'd like to end with a poem called A Covenant at Marylebone. One of the people that I didn't thank in this book, and it's a total crime, is Martin Penny, who's been one of my closest friends over these last years. And he's allowed me to have poetry events here all the time and to carry on. This poem has nothing to do with him per se, but Marylebone has meant a lot to me over these last few years. And this poem, I think, will be a nice segue into David's reading in a moment, because I think you'll be able to tell that this is a poem that's very much inspired by my take on kind of the New York School of Poets, at least partially. There's also obviously a bit of T.S. Eliot in here, a la pastiche. So thank you for listening. This is my last poem, and then we'll be hearing from David Lehman to close the evening. And I should just remind you, Martin asked me to remind you that we have tickets on sale tonight for some other events that are coming up. Some wonderful events. On December the 2nd, Alice Oswald will be reading here with her husband, Peter Oswald. He's also a very good poet, and he's a playwright. The two of them don't often read together, so that's a wonderful occasion. That'll be our Christmas, the last poetry event of the year for us here. That'll be our Christmas event. And on the 23rd, if you're not all poets, read out, Mark Scott from America will be reading, along with Jill Batson, one of Canada's best performance poets, as well as Graham Davies coming from Wales. He's a very fine Welsh poet. And someone else whose name has slipped my mind at the moment, please forgive me. I'm a little bit nervous because I'm reading my last poem, but all the details are online, so that's something to check out. And I did set this aside for, in the spirit of Little Englandism. Here are Philip Larkin's two novels, A Girl in Winter and Jill, together for only £6. So there you go. And they're even held together with a little thing there for you that you can get for free. This is A Covenant at Marylebone. Language has depleted its resources. The choices between languagery, made of its own parts, and voices parted from any primary sources. This has been a time of flowering loss. Much plentiful death has grown here. This has been a rich and fruitful gash. I would like to ask for help. The men that threw the drugged men from the aeroplane cared little. I hope someone can help. The men that plunged the weapon into the mother ignored her child. Can someone please help? The men that began the conquest saw neither the cobra nor the orangutan. You, up there. The cones like labyrinths, the labyrinths like combs, the combs made from bees that hum with life. It is time to succumb to a desire for a purpose. This must be a candle made of 3 languages. 1 word to light, 1 word to burn, 1 word to sputter. The wick of the world gutters in starlight. Lucifer is a lion who feeds on a nest of gazelles, winged gazelles, and the lion is also winged. Lady, you opened your body to give us something vague. How do you taste rejection in this ulterior context, where all possibilities seem null and void? By the supremely gifted singing of the Armani zebra, who earns more than you but loves no one but nuclear antigens. Lana, Hosanna, Lana Turner, died of throat cancer. This wound is a rose that opens in April. Kiss the convoluted vulva of the cut and climb the bridge of special wounds. As if meaning in this line was faintly heard, in the absence of authority, in the lacking of trust or greenery, in the sadness of repetition and homage. Get a crown of possible junk. Desire up a lantern or two mastodons. Inject into this given world new versions. See in the sky, sign a sky, lit like an advertisement, promising modification, income and excess. The sawdust crab mimics excellence. Its inhuman vaudeville a testament to the blinded ingenuity of the mover of all holocausts, the mover of all abortions. All intercourse is terribly commercial. Love itself is a ledger of sales. Alone, the provident and recurring motif, the sapling rejuvenates, without purpose, saving us from having to derive meaning from nature, in the adroit idiocy of its energetic fuckery that brings the world to a reverberant conclusion, in leaves green as a pastoral eye or Antarctic icicles. In sense, the returning and concluding force, vibrant and jaded parallels, lush, zoological and surfeit in the grotto where the shepherd kisses Lana's toes. Another child is born without fingers or terribly, without a nation-state. This child will hold things with a fiery tongue and build nations from flows. This has been a time of flowering loss. Much plentiful death has grown here. This has been a rich and fruitful gash, made of its own parts, and voices parted from any primary sources. This has been a time of flowering loss. Much plentiful death has grown here. Inject into this given world new versions. Thank you very much.